Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me today, it's my good friend Nate Tice. Nate, how you doing, buddy?
Doing very well. I actually watched a documentary last night. I've seen it before. Second time I watched it, maybe third. The Tony Hawk documentary. Till the wheels
I haven't
fall
seen
off.
it, but I've heard such good things about it.
It's very, very good. Very, very well done. Almost hit me differently now that I'm a dad. First time I watched a post-dadship and dadhood. And yeah, it strikes home. Anybody has HBO Max or just Max now.
Just Max.
Highly recommend it. It might be on other streaming networks, but highly, highly recommend it. But I'm doing very well. Other than Tony Hawk and, reliving the 80s and 90s, we got championship weekend, and I am fired up for championship weekend. So excited to be here.
I'm pumped. We had two really good games. So much to dig into with those games. Before we do that, though, we're going to talk about the coaching carousel and some of the news that's trickled out over the last couple of days. First things first, though, I wanted to say happy birthday to a listener of ours named Matthew Deck. His brother sent me a message, and he said for his 50th birthday, could you say happy birthday to my brother? He loves the show, and as someone who really loves unique birthday gifts and who has done things like this before, I sincerely appreciated the initiative. So I want to say happy birthday to Matthew, and thank you very much for listening. We sincerely appreciate it. I had a moment this week where I was talking to my wife and was looking at some of like the podcast numbers and just saying to her, like, this is crazy. Like, it's just crazy that people listen to the show that we put out and people like the show that we put out. So it is not lost on us. Matthew Mitchell, who sent that along, sincerely appreciate every single person who not only takes the time to listen, but takes the time to reach out and say stuff like that. So I hope you have a wonderful birthday, which is next week. And thank you very much for listening to the show.
Also, thank you for reminding me that I have to get a gift for my dad for his birthday next week. So thank you so much. But honestly, thank you everyone that listens. A few of you have said something to me in person, which has been every time it happens, makes my day. So appreciate every single person that listens, including my mom, who listens to almost every show.
Speaking of that, I asked my wife the other day, we were talking, and I was like, do you ever listen to the show? Like, when's the last time you listened to a full episode of the show? She's like, I've never listened to a full episode. She's like, sometimes I'll listen to like the first 4 minutes while you guys are bantering, and then I immediately turn it off. So even that is more support than I thought that she was giving us. I said, as long as you download it, then we're fine.
That's
as
it.
long as you just keep downloading it, that's all that
box.
matters. So
Thank
you very much. I really appreciate it. Let's dig into this.
Woo!
We have two fantastic games. We're going to go in chronological order here. Let's start with the AFC Championship game. Chiefs at Ravens. Ravens are -3.5. It doesn't get any better than this with the quarterbacks. This is the sort of game where I'm just completely bought into all things narrative in regard to the quarterbacks. Lamar about to win a second MVP, really establishing himself. Mahomes is in a tier all of his own. We've talked about this. That is going to be true until further notice. But when you talk about those other guys, who has a seat at the table? Lamar has, I think, announced himself. He has made it so there is absolutely no doubt remaining that he is one of those guys. But now the chance to beat Mahomes in the playoffs as part of that conversation, I love it. I love having to slay the dragon at the end of the road if you're going to get all the way there. And that's exactly what the Ravens and Lamar are set up to do right now.
It went from, when we did our QB draft, it's like, where would I take Lamar? And Derek Klassen luckily sniped him nice and high. And I was like, that's
all the credit to Derek Klassen.
I had a top choice at 5. I remember I was like, do I take Lamar here? And there's Derek at 4, nailing it. And that's where I think he is Lamar no matter what. I think, to me, the 3 that no matter what, it's Mahomes, of course, in his tier, but then Allen and Lamar in that kind of 1B tier is like they have solidified to me 3 of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. That's what I'm kind of narrowing it down to. Because at first I was always like, is it 2 guys? Is it 3 guys? 4 feels right, especially with the battle that's kind of goes on.
I think that if you want to make an argument for who belongs on that second line, I am fine with that second line being Lamar, Josh Allen, Herbert, and Burrow. I think I'm fine with that being the second line. And we talked about Stroud, and I was a little drunk on CJ Stroud a couple weeks ago. And we're projecting forward. I'm very, very excited about CJ Stroud.
I'm actually very proud of you for taking a deep breath.
And projecting.
But don't get me wrong. In the moment,
projecting it forward, I love that guy, and I would still take him over a lot of guys. But if we really want to take a step back and we're looking backwards as much as we're looking forwards, I would say that's how I'll phrase it. If we're looking backwards as much as we're looking forwards, that tier on the second line with Allen, Herbert, Burrow, and Lamar, I think that's the group. And I think that it has kind of crystallized this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I might have, this is going to be roasted, but I maybe
I know.
a half tier below that.
I know you. I know you do. I know you do.
I know. To me, it's a 4, and then it's the group. Well, 1, then 3, then it's a group of a couple more, a few more that I would put in there, and I would put Stroud in that group. So I guess that would be tier 3 technically, or tier 2 because there's 1A, 1B. But I think that group, that's where I have Burrow in there, Trevor, Stroud, Love, maybe. Those guys are kind of creeping in there, which I think is going to be a very fun discussion in probably May. And not January in the championship round. So let's get back to it.
All right. To me, the coolest aspect of this on both sides of the ball, I mean, this is going to be talked about as Lamar versus Mahomes, right? But my favorite matchups here are the quarterbacks against the defensive coordinators. So let's start with Lamar against Steve Spagnuolo and what sort of challenge that presents with the Chiefs defense. If you're Lamar, what are you most worried about facing a Steve Spagnuolo defense?
Oh, it's Steve Spagnuolo is going to chew bubblegum and blitz the quarterback. He's all out of bubblegum. I'm just going to use my joke from my article because that's what he's going to do. It's not, he will maybe bolo punch you for a quarter or a couple drives. Spags is going to blitz. And so that is the number one thing that Lamar Jackson and this offense have to account for. And I think Jackson, because of Monken modernizing the pass game and having the best group of pass catchers ever, Lamar is able to be more as consistent as he ever been against the blitz. I think he's always been up and down because he's going to hunt. If you're heating him up, he's going to attack downfield. He's going to try and create a play. I think what's really cool is Lamar this season barely scrambles against the blitz. He hangs in there and he is knifing blitzes up from the pocket. And even just looking last week, his first pass attempt of the entire game was a all-out blitz from the Texans, cover 0 on second down because D'Amico Ryans was going to throw everything at him, and 2 free runners on the play. Lamar drifts in the pocket, lets Zay Flowers win on a double move, and then sidearms it for a first down. Easy conversion. Easy for me to say as I'm watching all 22. But I want to use that play as contrast of why I got frustrated with Baker on Sunday. Same exact kind of look. Baker double clutches and takes a sack. Lamar is creating these first downs with it. But Lamar has been throwing from the pocket way more than he did his last MVP season, overall and against the blitz. Lamar has passed outside the pocket only 14.9% of the time. His MVP season in 2019, it was 21% of the time, 21.7 technically. That year is second behind Russell Wilson. This year, he is 15th. He's tied with Dak, and he's just above Gardner Minshew. So Russell, by the way, Russell Wilson is still ranked first in this category this year. So has stayed sticky for some quarterbacks, but now Lamar, this shows the growth of Lamar's game.
It's maturation.
That's it. It's what everyone's saying. It's so cool when you see it, and he's flashed it, and now he's doing it so well because the offense is asking him, but then you lay it out in the numbers, and it's like, there it is. That's exactly what it looks like when I watch Lamar Jackson, especially against the blitz.
Having these answers, what I was trying to think about Lamar in 2019 compared to Lamar now and how I would describe the difference with him as a passer. Maturation is a very good word. To me, it's just more surgical.
On somebody, you're following them. Your eyes are on there. If they run a vertical route, your back is to the quarterback. It's a natural way to scramble. But it's kind of a two-way thing here. Lamar's only scrambled 4% of the time against the blitz this year. This is way down. It was over 10% his last MVP year. So again, when you're talking about how it used to be grenades, again, this is surgical from the pocket. The other thing is the Chiefs this entire regular season only allowed 1 scramble when they blitzed. 1 scramble when they blitzed. The entire year. I had to look to make sure it was right. Like I was like,
it makes sense though, because they're going to have eyes on the quarterback when they do it. So that's even more of an onus on him having to win from the pocket and dice them up that way. So it's a fantastic challenge. If we want to see this version of Lamar kind of answer all of the questions along the way, I think this is the perfect challenge at this stage to really get a sense of how much he has grown. And that's why I love these moments for these guys. The last Lamar stat I wanted to throw out, because I thought this was absolutely wild. This is from Next Gen Stats. Lamar has won the game 62% of the time when he's pressured more than 40% of the time. I know that's a convoluted stat. For context, the NFL average is 36%. So he's won 62% of his games when he's pressured at that rate. The NFL average is 36%. That's insane. It's not surprising,
No.
but that's how good he is at mitigating some of these circumstances, and that's why this matchup rules.
Kind of playing into his hands. You're like, okay, hey, Lamar, go create every play. Oh yeah, that's kind of what happens. I will say it's the Chiefs when they when against the QB run game and against not just scrambles but design runs, they will allow a lot of successful plays, but not a lot of explosive plays, which is kind of what their whole defense has been a lot more of this year, which is
they don't allow explosives at all. I mean, it's one of the lowest rates in the NFL.
So they faced the 4th most designed QB runs this year in the entire NFL. They are 25th in success rate against QB designed runs. They did not allow an explosive run on any of those. 0 for 38. So again, they're going to make you work for it, even if you might get those 6-yard gains, 7-yard gains. You gotta get 10 of them as opposed to maybe just 130 or 40. This is a different defense than we've seen this Chiefs defense against the Bengals in the playoffs the last couple of years, where here's the blitz and then there is T. Higgins and Jamar Chase dunking on somebody. I've got to bring his name up because anytime I talk about bad Chiefs defense, Dan Sorensen trying to run to the deep half, way different type of defense because they are a more sound tackling team. Even if Lamar is very good at this, it's going to be kind of a fun little one-on-one, I guess, against the blitzer versus the scrambler.
I think that Spags against Lamar as a passer is fascinating. And I think it's a pretty even matchup. Where I do think the Ravens have an advantage is that you can run on this team. Yes, You've been able to run on this team, and we saw it as recently as last week with the Bills. And what's funny is that the Chiefs match personnel. So when the Bills were trotting out all the jumbo personnel last week, extra offensive linemen, 12 personnel, the Chiefs had 3 linebackers on the field. They still could not stop the run. The Bills had a 64% rushing success rate against the Chiefs base defense last week. So if they're going to match these Patrick Ricard 21-12, however you want to define it looks, that the Ravens want to run out of, they're going to need to show us that they can stop the run out of those looks because the Ravens are arguably the best rushing team in the NFL.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, is you mentioned the linebackers in one particular, Leo Chanel has been just go Badgers has been just kind of I don't want to say a queen on the chessboard. I'll say like a rook maybe, because he's very good moving straightforward. And that's why you want to use him. But how Spags has really kind of used him as this kind of quasi linebacker defensive tackle.
He's better at the point of attack than he is like moving sideline to sideline at this point, which is kind of strange for somebody of his position.
It's explosive. You just want him to go straight. He's a plugger. That's why everyone wanted him in the Patriots defense. I mean, seriously. But I think how they were using him even last week against the Bills, was it always perfect? No, but I like how they just used the personnel groupings. They were getting into essentially a 5-6 dime personnel, but it was 4 defensive linemen and Chanel. But let's call Chanel a defensive tackle here. Let's be honest. So 5 basically defensive linemen plus 6 DBs. And some of the looks were just kind of, oh, that's interesting. It'll cause you pause if you're an offensive player and you just see this. Okay, first the personnel is weird. All right, now they're bringing a man blitz out of that. So now you don't have to worry about Chanel, covering anybody. He's just blitzing. He's another defensive lineman. What was so cool, we just brought up all these zone blitzes. The wrinkle that they did last week, and they've done this before, it's like a robber blitz where the robber safety who will lurk in the middle of the field, he's technically on the running back, but the running back might get caught up in protection. So it's a bonus dropper and has a benefit of keeping eyes on the quarterback. And so I don't know. I think if you can get Lamar to throw, they like to throw quick. They like to throw slants. They like to throw flats. That can maybe be another answer for this defense to have, maybe that lurking safety over the middle. So just kind of a change up I noticed that they did last week. And I was like, oh, I wonder if they lean more into that. The other one was they did a little odd 3 defensive linemen, Chanel and Bolton, 6 DBs. And then so it was odd mirror. So Chanel and Bolton were looping on either side to in case Allen scrambled at all. So
yeah, and they did a lot of that where they made sure that they had eyes on him. The pass rush wasn't pin your ears back and just let it roll. No, so I'm assuming we see more of that against Lamar. And I'm really curious about how the Ravens are going to try to use the run game to dictate the way that this side of the ball feels.
Well, yeah, and also one player for particular for the Chiefs has to step up his game, and that's
some of the stuff you pointed out about Chris Jones in the run game this week in the piece you wrote for Yahoo I thought was fascinating. What did you find when you were looking back at some of the stats with him in run defense specifically this year?
So Jones is, and this is a compliment, is one of the best closers in the NFL. I love this term. Romo has used it a lot, but I know others have used it. But he shuts the door on an offense, whether it's a drive, usually third downs, or whether it's in the fourth quarter. And, with this team has played with a lot of leads the last few years because they have this guy named Patrick Mahomes. So he's kind of that perfect kind of element to throw in. The thing is, he's kind of been up and down against the run. He will pick and choose his spots, which is interesting for a 6'6", 310-pound man that lines up on the inside and the outside. And he's known as a mauler who's very good against the run and the pass. So I've known that anecdotally watching the Chiefs defense the last few years, that he'll take some plays off. That's totally normal. A lot of the best players do. You can't bring it 100% as much as we want these guys to do it. Totally get it. It was a little more pronounced this year. And I think there was a lot to Chris Jones's contract going into the year, kind of led to some funkiness, signed a 1-year kind of deal, has a lot of incentives about sacks, which Chris Jones has been top 12 in pressure rate this year. His sack, getting after the quarterback has not been an issue, but playing the run has. So Chris Jones has 18 tackles against the run this entire year. Okay. All right. All right. What does that mean, Nate? Thank you for asking. Jones was a first-team All-Pro this year. Okay. The other All-Pro defensive tackles on first and second team. This is their numbers in tackles against the run. And you have Dexter Lawrence with 34, Justin Madubuike with 33, Aaron Donald with 28. Oh, by the way, those are just through the first 3 quarters. Chris Jones only has 9 tackles in the first 3 quarters of games this entire season. Against the run, he is not, unless the run comes right at him, he's kind of just, he's picking and choosing his spots. But just to such an extreme measure, there's been some narrative. Oh, why does this Chiefs defense get better in the second half? Some of that is Spags adjustments, don't get me wrong. But some of it is just their best player starts kind of playing. He starts showing.
That tends to help. Yeah.
It really helps. So it gets more striking. It's like, oh, well, okay, that's funny. Ha ha. He doesn't get a lot of tackles. But it's like, this is like historically low for not only just any defensive lineman or pass rusher, but even just a defensive tackle, especially. So since 2019, there have been 91 defenders with 10 or more sacks. Okay. Or seasons with 10 or more sacks. Jones has 9 tackles against the run through the first 3 quarters. That's only better than 3 other seasons. So he ranks 88th in that metric. 2 Trey Hendrickson seasons and a Josh Uche season.
Who's a designated pass rusher?
Designated pass rushers. Those guys that they're not paid to play the run. They're actually net negatives against the run. Way net negatives against the run. As much as I like Henderson, as much as I like Uche. Chris Jones is known as a mauler defensive tackle that can line up on the outside, that can kick ass, play the run, and play the pass. So there's numbers that show up with the eye test with this. And it's just an effort thing, because when he cranks it up, he dominates. Yeah. Look at him pushing Deion Dawkins, who's a Pro Bowl, was my second-team All-Pro left tackle, into Josh Allen.
So that's my question about this game is where does he line up? When they have those gotta have it moments, and when it's third down, when it's defined pass situations, where do they think he's best? Is it over the left tackle? Is it over the right tackle? Yeah. We've seen the tackle rotations with the Ravens. Is it one of those snaps where Daniel Falele is playing right tackle? Is it one of those snaps where Patrick McCarry is playing left tackle? Do they think it's best inside? Where they think Chris Jones is best and where those matchups are at their advantage, I think that's a big question coming into this game.
It definitely is, especially when you have to guard Lamar Jackson. Like, do you want Chris Jones reading a play? Like, do you want him?
My vote is no.
No,
my vote is no to that.
Yeah. To me, I line him up on the inside. I think he has a physical. I'm not going to tell Steve Spagnuolo how to do his job, but I think how, Tyler Linderbaum is really good, but Chris Jones probably has 30 pounds on him. I think also Kevin Zeitler, the right guard, solid, but Jones has a matchup advantage on him. I think that Simpson versus Jones would be a great Haas fight. So I'm actually kind of very interested in that one, but I think you kick around the inside, but I think what's cool about how they use Jones is him and Carl Loftus have that kind of 2-man inside outside game. So this is going to be interesting how they use him.
The other thing personnel wise, I think is worth mentioning, Mark Andrews potentially back in this game. So how does that affect what the Ravens are going to do on offense? Is he going to play? Because if they want to live in those 12, 21 personnel looks and they get him likely on the field together, what sort of threats does that present? And then this Chiefs collection of DBs against this Ravens collection of pass catchers. Mm-hmm. This is one of the only games you'll see all year where the Ravens with Flowers, Bateman, and Odell Beckham are not at a decided advantage against the 3 corners that they're going to be playing against. And that is something that the Chiefs have shown all season. I mean, what Snead and McDuffie have done week in and week out this year is pretty ridiculous. This is a very, very hard team to throw the ball against. And again, that's why it gets back to, do they establish themselves on the ground? Because that is the path of least resistance.
I think they do. I think even with Chris Jones, even this has always been a thing against the Steve Spagnuolo defense is usually you can run on them because he's just so crazy and so exotic and guys are moving around everywhere. It's a little pronounced for the first 3 quarters, but they are okay. But this is a strength of this Ravens team, whether it's the running back or the quarterback. And also the Chiefs struggle against shotgun runs to the running back. That's another element to this. So it's a big time strength there. I also want to say that you'll see probably a lot more guys on the move against these blitzes. So look for a lot more slants and quick hitters as opposed to Isaiah Likely dunking on a guy. That's because that was a man matchup. So look for more just kind of slants, crossers, flats, a lot of quick hitters. I think that's what they evolved to in the second half last week. I think they can kind of continue it this week.
On the other side of the ball, another fantastic matchup between quarterback and defensive coordinator with Patrick Mahomes going against Mike McDonald. Before we dig into this, I wanted to ask you, is this the best defense that we think Patrick Mahomes has ever played in the playoffs? Because I was looking back over the last 5 years, and if you look at the metrics and even anecdotally, I think the answer to that might be yes.
The first one that comes to mind is that 2019 49ers. And I'm just trying to think who else he's facing the playoffs.
They had a dominant front, like a truly dominant front. But they were borderline top 10 if you look at a lot of different metrics, like EPA per play, DVOA. They were like 7th, 8th. They were very good, but they were not the sort of dominant unit that this Ravens team is. The other candidate, if you wanted to throw it out there, would be the 2021 Bills. Okay. They led the NFL in EPA per play on defense. They had the exact same EPA per play as this Ravens team does.
Okay.
The Bills played the 31st ranked schedule of opposing offenses according to DVOA that year. The Ravens are 4th this year.
Yeah, that's a big difference. Yeah.
So I really do think this might be the best defense that he has ever played in the playoffs, and that's why I'm so excited about this.
Yeah, at least one of, at the very least, top 2 or 3. Yeah, no, it is, and also. It's the one thing I like. You see, I would always defer to if you're playing a talented quarterback and how you do a defensive plan. Change the picture on them.
Yeah, just like all over the place.
You have to. These guys are just too good if you just stay static, and that's what you have to do. So it's also what the Ravens are a major in. It's what they do. They have perfected this year. They do as well as anybody I've seen in recent memory, at least. So that's gonna be awesome to watch.
We're going to see the Rolodex coverages. We're going to see them throw a bunch of different shit at Mahomes. I want to know, if you're Andy Reid, how do you attack this Ravens defense? Because I don't think we've seen very many teams this year have a good plan. And we've seen them play against some of the best offenses in the NFL. They blanked the Dolphins. They shut down the 49ers. The Rams had some success against them. But this is a defense that, even if they haven't played against a lot of elite quarterbacks, have played against a lot of elite offenses, and they've had an answer pretty much every step of the way.
The Rams example is the best answer I could have because they have a great run game. Chiefs don't. Chiefs do not this year. They just don't. Even if it has been better, it's still average-ish and not a true top 5-ish unit that you can build around. But having said that, that is first and foremost what you have to do. Again, I just talked about this with Spags defense. That's more blitz happy. The Ravens will blitz. They do run simulates. But when you have a moving picture, pound the rock, wad it up, that's where you can get runs to pop, which is what I thought the Rams did such a good job of, especially in the first half in their matchup. The passing game
like 10 times to start the game.
It was awesome. It's beautiful. It's like a highlight of the year. And then they fell apart in the red zone, which should have been an indicator of what may have happened against the Lions. But
and guess who's had problems in the red zone over the last couple of weeks? The Kansas City Chiefs. So even if they can move the ball, is that something that creeps up again? So how the Chiefs go about this, I think, is just such a fascinating question. And we've seen the Chiefs aren't as much of a motion at the snap team as some of these other teams have been, like what the Niners are, what the Rams are, what the Dolphins are. But the Chiefs do a very intentional job of motioning and shifting before the snap in order to get information. So I assume we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see shifts. We're going to see motions. How much can you tell Patrick Mahomes before the play starts for that changing picture to matter a little bit less?
I don't know if Chase went over this. Did he talk about Mahomes' changing cadence?
No.
Okay, so I noticed that Mahomes calls out the front when he gives his cadence. So you'll hear him say 42 even being even front. Odd.
Interesting.
I've heard it all year. I've been meaning to bring it up. I might not hear with some crowd noise this game, but why I'm bringing that up, it's probably going to hear a lot of words come out of his mouth because the defensive picture is going to change so much. So like even, odd. You know, usually it's just like even like against the Bills last week. Even because it was 4 down. But no, I was wondering if Chase talked about that.
But that's so interesting though, because especially in this game, that's why the Ravens are so cool, because the Ravens do everything. The Ravens have the Ravens' best personnel, in my opinion, is their nickel personnel when Kyle Hamilton is in the slot. So that is big nickel. But they were very comfortable last week playing a lot of regular nickel, where Arthur Millette is in the slot and Kyle Hamilton's back there. They'll play base, but they'll play base with a 4-man front, where Malik Harrison is a stacked linebacker with the other two. They'll play base in a 5-man front, where Malik Harrison is walked down on the line of scrimmage, or it's Kyle Van Noy. When they're in nickel and passing situations and it's a 4-man front, you have Odafe Owe as a pass rusher. When they're in their bigger personnel, you can have Kyle Van Noy there, and he can be a little bit more of a run stuffer. Like all of the different versions of this team. And the Lions are like that too. The Lions will just throw a ton of stuff at you. It's different with the Ravens because the Ravens players are very good.
Yeah. They have several All-Pros.
Yes.
And several guys we call, Swiss Army knives and all that. But that nickel thing is so interesting because I think the one way, and I've brought this up a few times, but also I think others have too now, is the Chiefs with all their tight ends, so doing the 12 and 13 personnel stuff. Last week was the most they've used multi-tight end looks ever since Mahomes has been a starter. Previous week, the most they've ever used 13% personnel, which is 3 tight ends since Mahomes has been a starter. Which is interesting, is you brought up all the personnel looks. The Ravens will match 12 personnel depending on their call, but also depending on the situation.
Yes.
So notice this. This is we usually use early downs, first and second down. So technically, run downs are 1st and 10 and 2nd and 1 to 6. And then there's 2nd and long, which is its own subcategory, but just kind of explaining how kind of game plans go. So 1st and 10 and 2nd and 1 to 6, a rundown, they will be in more base. On 2nd and 10 and longer, that's where we see the big nickel looks. When you're going against 12 personnel or 21 personnel, like the 49ers or other teams that do that. But what's interesting is they're out of base, 18th in combined success rate and explosive play rate. But you get them when they're in sub, when they're in nickel, 3rd. 5, and they only average 5 yards per play as opposed to.
And that's why I think that's where they'll go. Unless it's 13 personnel. I think against 12, they'll match it with nickel every single time because teams have historically done that against Kelsey. I wonder when they go to the 13 personnel looks if they feel compelled to put more big bodies on the field, or they say, we're going to dare you to run the ball against us when we have 5 DBs.
And that's what the Eagles did last year in the Super Bowl. They said, we'll dare you to keep running it. And the Chiefs were like, okay. And they did.
But they were different things because the Eagles' run defense was struggling last year and the Chiefs' rushing offense was better last year. So a lot of different things to consider when you think about this matchup. Player-wise, and there's a lot of stuff to think about before we get into this. Joe Thuney does not seem like he's going to play with that pec injury. So now you have Justin Madubuike against a backup left guard. And one of the best things about the Chiefs' performance last week, they blanked Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones in that game. Those guys combined for 0 pressures, according to Next Gen Stats. Does that happen again with Madubuike going against the backup? The Ravens had 44 sacks this year with 4 or fewer pass rushers. That was 9 more than any other team in the NFL. So they do not need to blitz to get pressure. And if they have a matchup advantage on the interior, that's something that the Chiefs haven't necessarily had to worry about. And there's plenty of other ones. Travis Kelce against Kyle Hamilton in some of those big nickel looks is going to be fascinating. And then Marlon Humphrey, who missed last week, probably going to be back this week. He is practicing. And if you go back and watch the very few wins that the Texans had, several of them were picking on Ronald Darby in one-on-one in some of those looks. And if Marlon Humphrey's out there, it's just one fewer pads you have to taking advantage of this Ravens defense. So I'm not putting anything against Mahomes. I would not be surprised if he lit it up again. But if he did against this defense with this version of the Chiefs offense, it's up there with the most impressive things he has ever done in the playoffs.
I'm just fascinated. It's always fun. We talk about this when we watch these good corners, how they play these good quarterbacks. And it's like, all right, so what's your answer this week, Mike? What you got? What are you going to throw at this guy? And Mahomes solves a lot, and he finds answers, and Andy Reid solves a lot. So they're motivated. So let's see it. This is playoff Andy Reid. This is playoff Mahomes, and we're going against, like you said, one of the best defenses he's ever gone against. And it's so funny that in maybe the biggest moments in these biggest games is like the best piece of advice almost is like keep it simple by keeping it heavier personnel and keeping this defense that wants to be exotic, keeping them simple. And I think that's why I keep coming back to like bigger bodies might come to it, but it's going to come down to the quarterback. Let's be honest. And it's going to come down to the coverage against him.
Some of the details, I think it's so important to point out, like you did, cadence, tempo, just all of those things where you can kind of control how the game is going as an offense. And this is one of those moments where I think it's important to remember how elite Mahomes is mentally and just how he can win between the ears, information, how much he gathers, how much he sees. This is one of the perfect examples of that, because too often I think we get intoxicated, and I'm guilty of this, by that 2nd and 8 throw on the move to MVS. And we forget that this guy is as good as anybody in the mental aspect of the game. And that really, really matters against a defense like this.
All these guys, all the guys we just talked about as, you know, the seats at the table, Lamar, Josh Allen, Mahomes, all of them are fantastic pre-snap now. Lamar, I watched him last week. I meant to tweet it actually. Saw him change a protection point. They changed the play. It was perfect, and he diced him. Oh, no, he missed the throw, and that's why it was incomplete. He didn't miss the throw. It was incomplete, and that's why I didn't post it, because I know assholes on Twitter are going to go like, oh, you didn't complete the throw. But also, Josh Allen, the last year and a half, 2 years, has become one of the best guys at changing protections, understanding the pre-snap. But having said all that, Mahomes has done this for several seasons, and this year he's leveled up even more. That cadence thing shows an understanding of what the defense is in, which means he's handling, like, him and the offensive line are already on the same page right away, which is, there's other quarterbacks we've talked about on the show that you want to see more of that. And this is what these dudes are doing. They do the extension stuff, but then before the snap of the ball, they're winning.
All right, let's get to our next game here. Look at the NFC Championship game. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's get to our next game here. The NFC Championship game, Lions at Niners. Niners are 7-point favorite at home against Detroit. On the AFC side, you have the superstar MVP quarterbacks, right? On this side, we have teams that have built borderline offensive juggernauts, but in a very different way. You have the first pick in the draft. A former first pick in the draft is the quarterback in Detroit. You have the last pick in the draft as the quarterback in San Francisco, which I'm sure we'll hear 100 times during the broadcast. Sure. But the through line to me is taking guys that were seen as replaceable assets, surrounding them with elite talent all across the unit and an elite play caller, and allowing that guy to unlock a version of himself that most people never, ever could have predicted. That to me is what ties these teams together on that side of the ball.
Oh, and just that these offenses are cool and they have cool
two
players.
Best watches in the league, potentially. I mean, I think you can make an argument that Ben Johnson and Kyle Shanahan have been the two best play callers in the NFL this season, and maybe even over the last 2 seasons.
Yeah. Johnson's just, again, he's the sniper. It's like you see it, they get into certain areas and sometimes they give it to Craig Reynolds because he's accidentally in the game. But hey, you don't ask geniuses how they work things out. No, but that turns out I think the St. Brown brothers. I saw that. That was actually kind of funny. It was actually like that's how it goes sometimes. It's like, why is that guy in the game? It's like sometimes it just happens. It just like
the position coach just shuttles somebody in. He's not even thinking about it. Yeah,
they thought they were kicking a field goal. They're actually going for it. Yeah, I know. Sorry, but yeah, sorry, side tangent. But those guys, what McVay has done, but all of them, I think, is just they commitment to the run game, but it's also just commitment to their players. Let their players work. Like what we get to see Brandon Ayuk become his best self. Amon-Ra St. Brown is his best self. They get used in awesome ways. We're going to talk about in a second how guys like St. Brown and also how guys like Laporta are used interchangeably is something that's really cool. But not a lot of, and again, these are simple things, simple tweaks, but not all of the guys put the work in to get that out of their players, because that's an extra word to learn. That's an extra thing to have on the game plan. That's an extra play to practice. And it's like these guys, it's just no matter who's in there, if backups are in there, these guys perform. That Craig Reynolds example is just one. Remember Craig Reynolds wiping out the Bucs player on
I sure do.
Every guy plays hard. Every guy knows exactly what the F they're supposed to do. And that's what both of these offenses do. And that's why they're awesome.
What I love is that the offense is an expression of the personnel in a perfect way. Guys are utilized in the exact way that they should be utilized, right? Like Deebo Samuel's skill set is perfectly expressed within the Niners offense. Christian McCaffrey's skill set is perfectly expressed within the Niners offense. What Brandon Ayuk is specifically for this Niners offense, what George Kittle is. And you can apply the same exact thinking to what the Lions offense is. Think about how Amon-Ra St. Brown is used in this offense compared to how he might be in a lesser offense. Mm-hmm. What they've asked Sam Laporta to be. Laporta lining up as the number one receiver and like roasting corners on in-breaking routes within this offense is insane. Like that is already the type of player that he is. What they do with Penei Sewell on the move. Some of that tackle pull bluff stuff last week where he's getting out in space as this 340-pound just monster truck is insane. Jahmyr Gibbs is the same way. In a different sort of offense, you could look at a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs as a shiny toy that you didn't know how to deploy. And that is not at all how this feels with the Lions. And then you combine it all together with a quarterback that knows exactly how to take advantage of it. Like what they asked Jared Goff to be, what they asked Brock Purdy to be. Could they be those guys in different offenses and different circumstances? Maybe not. But what they have created for those guys allows these offenses to thrive because of how specific and tailored it all is.
And the passing game's all from the pocket, just few ball firing out. It's chunk plays. They're going for gashes, and the good offenses do that. They go for gashes, and these
are explosive offenses. Yes. It's not these are the top two teams in the NFL in 20-yard plays. The Niners are number one, the Lions are number two. And if you watch these teams, that feels right. In terms of the stakes here, it does feel like there's a level of urgency on the AFC side, right? Like the Ravens have to feel like this is our year. Like we have to do it this year. I know this is Mahomes. I know it's the Chiefs. We have to do it. And the Chiefs are contenders every single year with Patrick Mahomes. So there's always urgency. On the NFC side, I think the Niners have to feel the exact same way the Ravens do. Like we've been building to this moment. We have to get this done. The Lions are the team that people didn't necessarily expect to be here, but I still think it's important to jump on these opportunities when you get them. Colton Pouncey, our excellent Lions writer, wrote about it this week. This could be the last dance with these guys, man. Ben Johnson might be taking that job in Washington. This group, as currently comprised, might never be the same again. And I know that you look at how young they are, the cap space, and we'll talk about how they're built next week with Barnwell. And I'm actually very excited to dig into that conversation. But when you get this close, it's going to hurt either way, even if you might be a little bit ahead of schedule.
And ahead of schedule is just what the 2006 New Orleans Saints were with that offense. They made the NFC Championship game, and this I couldn't believe that parallel actually kept
up to that point. Probably one of the best days of my entire life, the 2006 NFC Championship game.
Oh, I'm sure. I remember watching that game. Yeah, so my friend Sam's shout out Sam. But if we're on this timeline, it means the Lions are going to win the Super Bowl in 2026. That's what we follow that 2006 Saints timeline. They won in 2009, but. I know that's a great point. Ben Johnson, we've brought up his name, I think, every show, and he is one of the hot candidates for a reason. And, he's a big part of it. And also Hank Fraley might follow him, the offensive line coach. That was a little tidbit that's like, that has more ramifications.
It's huge. And then that's why it's important to jump on these opportunities. Even if they're young, even if there's a bright future ahead, you never know what's coming around the bend. So and this is a team that, even if they are big underdogs in this game, is more than capable of going toe-to-toe with the Niners in a lot of different ways. And I think that starts with their offense against the Niners defense. We know that the Niners have struggled against the run this year. And I think that is the first area where the Lions can really take advantage of them. The Niners were 31st in run defense success rate this season. And the Lions are a good running team. They're a diverse running team. And if we're trying to build the case of, okay, how can the Lions do this? What they can do on the ground against this team is probably the first place to start.
It always is. That's also the identities that these offenses share. They're going to pound the rock. And also you said it's extension of the personalities. The 49ers is very, they're both motion heavy, but it's free flowing and tosses and winebacks and counters. And then you watch the Lions, it's just 6 offensive linemen. Boom, boom. It just keeps just pounding right down your throat. And it's like, oh, yeah, all right, here's a little toss play to help you out. But what's cool about this Lions offense, and is a feature of this offense, is the diversity in the run game that you brought up. They are the only team that has is top 10 rates in the 5 major food groups of the run game, which is zone, pin pull, duo, gap, and trap. Draws in there as well, but I think they're up there too as well. But draws the other one. But they have a talented offensive line, and so this lets them get to the path of least resistance. Oh, this team is an odd front, a 3-down front, so we'll do more gap this week. Okay, this team likes to do 4-down with a bunch of off-ball linebackers. Okay, it's pin pull this week. And it's just like giving a talented quarterback a diverse drop back game. Let's give our talented offensive line a diverse run game. Let's let them go to work and get them to the path of least resistance. But what that allows us to do, though, is like you said, let's come up with a game plan here. All right, what run are you going to focus on since you guys run everything? What are the 49ers defense? What are they specifically not great at? It's awesome because the Lions can just watch last week and look
last
at
week is a perfect example. They absolutely gashed them with pin pull over and over and over again.
2 runs, pin pull and split zone. And split zone is zone with a tight end kicking across the formation, unless you're the Lions using St. Brown or the Rams using Cooper Kupp, but there are exceptions. But
someone slicing across the formation.
I know. In my articles, I always do offensive player because I always get some high school coach that goes, "Hey, I know you said tight end there, but we actually do that with a receiver." And it's like, I know, guys, I know. I'm sorry, but why that's good. What my theory of why split zone is good, watching on film and also just looking at the stats, is because against this 49ers defense, they are the 4th worst defense in defending split zone in terms of success rate. The Lions offense, it's the 6th best offense in running split zone in terms of success rate. Strength on weakness here. Why I think it's valid against this 49ers defense is it takes advantage of the aggressiveness of Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. It's giving them eye candy. They also have to stay gap sound. A tight end moving across is, oh, that's a gap moving. We got to bump with him in case that run comes back that way, or a bootleg, because that's their responsibility if that guy runs into the flat. The other thing, too, is it wads up the defensive line. They want to be all aggressive. Okay, we're running zone. We're just washing you guys away. Let the running back go to work. So that's one run that the Packers used. I think the Lions are going to run it several times. So look for that tight end crossing. But then the pin pull play was another great example that the Packers used that the Lions major in as well.
The Lions were 3rd in the NFL this year in EPA per rush on toss runs, which isn't specifically pin pull, but just toss runs. They were 3rd in success rate as well. The Niners were 29th in EPA per rush allowed on those plays, 31st in positive play rate allowed. So I'm curious, okay, the Niners know that they might attack them with this. The Packers did it last week, and we've seen so much pin pull this year. That's an offseason discussion. It has been one of the de jour runs of the, I mean, you watch it over and over and over again with so many different teams. Even just last week, looking at all the divisional round games, it's popping up all over the place. But the Niners know that they showed a weakness for that last week, and the Lions are probably going to do it. So what does the next step of that look like on both sides? I have absolutely no idea.
I don't either. I've been kind of like I'm like, what is the counter off of that? Because that is the counter. Like that is the pin pull is the thing that you do as the auxiliary pitch. So if you major in, okay, so all right, let's revert back. So it's like maybe toss outside zone because, okay, the defenders know that they can't get upfield. So now they're kind of staying and then you can reach them on zones. Again, do you want to tight end trying to block Nick Bosa though, or Chase Young? You pick your poison there. Is it working up the middle? I guess that changes the angle. Split zone's another one. That tight end kicks out the defensive end. Is now he kicking out the D end from the inside instead of the outside? I don't know either. So I'm curious what the wrinkle is because they always come up with a wrinkle. Ben Johnson does and Hank Frigley.
I want to see them seek out some explosives on the ground though. That's what I want to see them try to hit because we saw that against Green Bay. Aaron Jones is fantastic. I love Aaron Jones. He's one of my favorite players the last 10 years. Jahmyr Gibbs is different. You get Jahmyr Gibbs out of the gate on some of these, and we're looking at gashes on the ground. And that's important against the Niners because they don't allow gashes through the air. Nope. They have the lowest explosive pass rate allowed in the NFL this year. So if you're going to hunt explosives in this game, it's going to be a lot easier to do that on the ground. And thankfully, the Lions drafted a guy who is doing that as well or better as anybody else in the NFL.
And they can do both. They have thunder and lightning. It's great. It's right into their strength. It's like you do not have to twist the Lions' arm to run the ball. They're like, oh, sweet.
Exactly. So that's one area where the Lions' strengths align with the Niners' weakness.
Yeah.
One area where it's strength on strength that to me is the coolest part of this entire matchup, the battle of the middle of the field. Mm-hmm. The Lions this year are 2nd in the NFL in success rate and EPA per dropback on throws between the hashes. Just sit back and imagine in your mind Jared Goff ripping all of those in-breakers over and over and over again. They were 2nd in the NFL in attempts between the hashes. Their EPA per dropback on those plays is about twice the league average. That's how good they were on those attempts this season. The Niners, not surprisingly, number 1 in the NFL in EPA per dropback allowed on throws between the hashes, and they are 2nd in success rate. You just think about Fred Warner sitting there on the hash the entire game. You are not getting him off of that thing. And I think this is even cooler is because you have that matchup where it's strength on strength. Last week, the Lions played against the Bucks. The Bucks are dead last in EPA per dropback allowed on throws between the hashes, 11.3 yards per attempt this season. And that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You have all of these blitzes, so you're going from a team that is consistently vacating the middle of the field to a team that does better defending that area than anyone else in the NFL. And against the Lions specifically, I think that it becomes the area of the field and the area of the game to watch.
This is actually another thing that they could steal from the Packers. I think a lot of people should steal from what the Packers did this year, personally, run game and play action wise. But their play action game, they kind of played on the tropes that Fred Warner, they subverted them sometimes. So they're running play action, and Fred Warner is the best at looking up routes. That play action happens. He goes, all right, here comes an over route. Where are you at? He turns sideways. He literally turns sideways.
It's unbelievable how good he is at picking that stuff up out of the corner.
And he just sniffs it out. He's like, okay. Oh, here you are. Okay, I'm going to carry you. Oh, okay. And then 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Okay, he's going to probably check it down. Okay, now I'm going to go tackle the check down route. The Packers were having like the fake work opposite of where that over was coming from. So there's a couple times Warner was literally turned the wrong way. And I've only seen that happen a couple times. And this is, LaFleur. He's very good at this stuff. He's played this defense several times in very big games. Curious if the Lions kind of copy some of that. Ben Johnson is not opposed from kind of using what he's seen the previous week and putting his own little fingerprints on it. So kind of playing on that, using that strength against him, a little judo there. Okay, you want to come at me? Yeah, this way we're going to turn the other way on that one. So that's one little tweak I want to see because it's hard. It's really, really hard to throw on Fred Warner. He knows the typical NFL traditional designs as well as anybody.
The Lions do such a great job of pinning guys down, though, in those looks where all the high lows, they do such a fantastic job of just giving eye candy to linebackers where you almost have to react to it. And they'll just flood those areas. We'll have a running back underneath, you'll have a high, and then you'll have a low. So at a certain point, like the linebacker has to make a decision. And their ability to open that area of the field, again, contrasts with how good the Niners are at shutting it down. So who wins that matchup, I think, goes a long way to decide who wins this side of the ball. The other part of this that I think is worth watching is the Packers, when they did have success, it was bleeding out zone coverages and having something run behind it. So can you have an entire side cleared out, that big Jaden Reed crosser that they hit, but what does that require? Time. That it requires time to be able to do that. So it's hard to hit explosives on this team, but if you manage to bleed out a side of the coverage, it is possible. And the one other...
Oh, I'm sorry. That's why bringing up the explosive runs is so important. You have to get explosive somewhere. It doesn't always have to be the pass game, but if you can get them on the run, okay, then we can nickel and dime, and we don't care about throwing underneath because you're kind of switching the two roles.
The other area where you could potentially find explosives, the Packers took advantage of Ambry Thomas multiple times.
Yes.
So is that the one guy, if you get him in some one-on-one looks away from the passing strength, because the Niners play a lot of quarters, that can turn into one-on-one. So do you have those looks where Amon-Ra St. Brown is lined up outside in some of those one-on-one matchups the same way he was against Ahkello Witherspoon in the wild card round? So that matchup specifically, whoever is going to be trying to take advantage of Thomas, I think is worth watching. And then an area where I think the Niners potentially have an advantage, we're looking at a backup left guard and a banged up center for the Lions in this game. And Javon Hargrave was a problem against the Packers last week. There was that one red zone drive where he blew it up all by himself.
There's no first 3 quarter stats with Javon Hargrave. It's all 4 quarters with Javon Hargrave.
So that is one area where even this Lions offensive line that's very, very good, that's something to watch. And then the Nick Bosa Penei Sewell matchup, that is going to be appointment viewing for 4 quarters.
It's going to be great. Yeah, Brandon Thorne will be all over that one. But the other thing too is can't help but shout out my Y tight ends. Brock Wright is out for the year now, broken forearm. We only can handle so many Brock Wright catches, and now he's
not ready for it.
World's not ready for it. So another character of the 2023 season, I think, is going to have a lot of appearances this game, and that's our guy Dan Skipper. The Lions love to be in jumbo offensive linemen. I think he'll be out there because if you get this 49ers team to be in base, they're even worse against the run than they are against sub. So.
Which is so weird. It's such a weird quirk statistically.
Isn't it funny? Every team just has their little, the little Achilles heel that you can just maybe shoot that arrow at. Yeah, so that was just I'm curious if that gets in there, because also you don't want, as much as Sam Laporta is awesome and Jahmyr Gibbs has gotten better at pass protection, Laporta's still a negative as as a run blocker that you have to hide, which is another advantage of the split zone stuff, because he can block across and kick out a guy as opposed to block at the point of attack. Sorry, I had to mention that one as well. But look for some Dan Skipper to replace some Brock Wright.
On the other side of the ball, the Lions offense stacks up with the Niners defense. It's a matchup where I think Detroit has real advantages. It is harder to find that on this side of the ball.
Yeah. Tried to find some, and it was
it's hard to figure out where you look. They are decent against the run. So they are a decent run defense. So that is one area where maybe they can hold up. But the problem is that the way they have to load up against the run makes them very vulnerable. Yeah. So according to Next Gen Stats, the Lions have matched 21 personnel, which the Niners live in. We know this. 2 backs, fullback on the field. The Lions have matched 21 personnel with base defense, so 3 linebackers, on 92% of opponent snaps this year. That is the highest rate in the league. They are 28th in success rate on defense out of those looks and 31st in yards per attempt allowed. Brock Purdy this year has averaged 6 times the league average in EPA per dropback against base defense. If you were going to load up against this Niners team to stop the run, which a lot of people feel like they have to, they are going to annihilate you. Yep. And that didn't happen last week when the Packers did, but there's no rainstorm coming for the Lions this week. So I think that is an important thing to take into consideration. So when you think about that, just the way the Lions have played this stuff, where the Niners are good, it's just hard to find threads to pull at where the Lions could potentially keep up. And that's why I think I wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe throw a curveball with how they match personnel, with how they respond to some of this stuff, because the same old answers against this Niners team, I think, is a way to get yourself into trouble.
You hinted at it, and I will give credit to Aaron Glenn. Like, the Lions defense is bottom 10, no matter how you splice it. Every metric, every situation, it's just, no, there's nothing they're really great at. Again, the run game, they are pretty good at, but run defense. But the problem is they're gashed through the air. But I want to give credit to Aaron Glenn is that he at least tries. He at least varies up the looks. He at least blitzes. He at least changes the coverages, changes the personnels, all the stuff we've complimented Spagnuolo and McDonald for what they do. Glenn does the same thing. Again, it's the horse problem. It's the guys not be able to execute, maybe not be able to get there, maybe a step slow, maybe being overmatched when they are in certain coverages and all that. But he at least tries. But that's what you have to do. You have to hope to throw the monkey wrench into the Shanahan engine. And there's a ball popped up. There's a pick. We got a short field. And now we got a 2-score lead. And we know how the jokes about Shanahan offenses when they have to play from behind. That's what you have to hope for, because everything you look at, it's like, oh, they match with heavier bodies. They hold offenses to a sub 30% rushing success rate. Don't mind that they let up the most EPA per passes out of those same looks. Okay.
They get absolutely gashed in those looks.
And play action is another thing. 49ers are going to run a ton of play action. That's what they do. They get 25% explosive play rate when they run play action. Lions are the worst team defending play action. They've given up the most explosives in the entire NFL against play action. They've given up 9.3 yards per play. Or I'm sorry, over 10 yards per play against play action. The 49ers average over 9 yards per play against play action. So it's again where it's like, that's why it's just got to be chaotic. You can't just live and just take it on the chin. It's one of these where it's like, it's haymakers, just throw stuff. And that's what it has to be. I think their offense can get into some nice game scripts, but the defense has to make it chaotic.
In my opinion, if you're going to trot out Jack Campbell and base defense out there, this is going to be one of those Shannoscope sort of games. Yeah. That's going to be a long day for you. So do they match with lighter bodies against 21 personnel, and what do those lighter bodies look like? Because they have 3 safety looks that they can use. And if you look at teams that have had success against the Niners this year defensively, it's a lot of teams, the Ravens, the Browns, the Bengals, all of them were willing to live in big nickel 3 safety looks. And I do think that you can make an argument that's the best way to attack this Niners defense. For the Lions, though, that means you take Brian Branch off the field. They used Melfonwu, Kirby Joseph, and CJ Gardner-Johnson on 6 plays together last week, all in dime. So none when it was just the 3 safeties on the field. So it would be an unconventional answer compared to what we've seen from the Lions a lot this year, but I think you have to be unconventional in this game.
It's unconventional warfare. That's what it has to be. Yeah, no. So but Melifonwu is very important. He's played so well the last 2 months, not only just big plays, but just down to down, just little small plays. it's really come together for him. And the fact that his traits, it's like, oh, geez, what could you keep growing?
That was never in doubt, man.
No, it's like,
isn't the other one his brother? The other Malfoy?
Yeah, brother or cousin. Yeah.
He also was an insane tester.
Insane. Yeah, but this one actually put it together. But he is going to be one of the key matchups anywhere, because I think he could be an answer for Glenn to trying to reach for. Are you going to cover Kittle? Are you going to cover CMC? Are we going to use you on blitzes? Are we going to use you and Branch and some things? So I think how he plays, what his role is, he could have a big impact on this game, because he can make an impact. He can be an impact player, or a potential can be one.
If I'm building the case, him getting some sort of strip sack, him creating some sort of negative play as a blitzer, that is part of the script. Him and Branch just making some splash, explosive negative plays on defense, I think has to be part of this. And they'll do it, right?
Yeah.
They'll do it.
What's the other matchup they got?
So again, let's keep pulling at that thread, because the one other matchup that I think is a consistent advantage for them in this game is what Aiden Hutchinson can do against the Niners right tackle.
Yes.
He's been phenomenal in the playoffs, and it's even more important, I think, for him to dominate this game because of how much the Lions are going to have to punch above their weight on that side of the ball.
And even if he doesn't get home, just create that edginess, just like he did with Baker. Just create where he's a step slow, a second slow, progresses just a step slow. It's what you have to hope for. And Niners fans want to say, it's like, you have a decided advantage here. We're just saying, like, to give the Lions a chance, this is what they have to do, because that offense is just such a
Where are the paths? I think that's the biggest question when you're thinking about an upset.
Sometimes we do this and people go, man, you act like the 49ers are going to lose. I get how this sounds, but this is just what the one storyline the path, like you said, that could go. So, because there's not a lot. The Niners offense has a lot of answers that they could solve and throw at defenses as well.
Some well-timed blitzes against some of those motions, when maybe you understand when they're going to snap the ball, you know what their tendencies are in some of those motions, and guys coming off the edge. Again, you go back to the Ravens game, and where the Ravens had some success against the Niners, it was in the exact same sort of situations. And
the Patrick Queen blitz, remember?
And that's important. And so a couple of those coming off the edge, can you get some explosive plays? The Lions in the second half of this season, heavy man team. And against the Niners, we know how dangerous that is. So again, just one more layer that makes it difficult. The Lions led the NFL in percentage of man coverage on third down in the second half of the season. George Kittle, Juwan Jenkins, and Brandon Ayuk all rank in the top 20 league-wide in EPA per target against man. Ayuk was 5th in yards per route run against man. Kittle was 17th. So if you get to third down, typically when this Niners team struggles, if you're going to play man against them,
if you're looking for a player prop,
Ayuk over everything, probably something that you should look at.
Yeah.
One more question though about the Niners pass catchers. If there's no Debo, what does that mean practically for the Niners offense in your mind?
Don't use Chris Conley on jet motion stuff. That'll be the one change that we'll see. But knowing that they don't have Debo's one thing, because when Debo's healthy and playing, Shanahan's like, oh, here we go. Got the game plan with him. So not knowing that he has that tool available is one thing. I think actually just unlocking the guys you do have. So if it is Juwan Jennings, get his butt blocking, get him by pinning the edge, get him into unconventional looks, get him, being a de facto tight end. I think again, they lean even more into 21 personnel. We don't need to be an 11. But I think still some of the advantages that they have, they can just keep doing what they do, how they use McCaffrey, how they use Kittle, things we've already talked about, the advantages with Ayuk on the outside. Those are still natural advantages that they don't have to change much. When Debo's in there, it's Charizard. They reach that final form, but still this is, 90% or 85% of it, which is still one of the best offenses that has a ton of answers. So there's not much
limited.
Yeah.
So there's a chance that he will play. So it's something to keep an eye on, but they are a different beast and it's just harder to defend them, obviously, especially in man coverage because of all the places he can line up, of the tells you get, just so many different things to consider. But I just hope that this is a game where these offenses just go punch for punch the entire time.
That's what I hope to, yeah.
The over-under's 51. If this is the sort of game where it's like a 35-31 sort of finish between these two offenses, that would be the ideal outcome for me.
That's great. Same. That's all I want. I just want some good offenses. And I think both have very easy means to pick at, but it's just going to be interesting if what the game script unfolds, because that will decide a lot in this matchup.
Two phenomenal games. One thing I forgot to mention in the Ravens-Chiefs game that I wanted to.
What you got?
Even if the Ravens don't blitz a lot, using their linebackers in some of those mugged up looks to keep the back in is something that I would be watching, because the Chiefs led the NFL in the amount of dropbacks with only 5 pass blockers, with 5 guys out in the route. They want that. They want to get 5 out consistently, and I think that their passing offense looked really good against the Bills when they were able to. The Bills don't blitz, or blitz very infrequently. Yeah. So are there ways that the Ravens, either with some of those looks or by actually bringing pressure, can try to keep the back in and give Mahomes fewer answers? It's the one thing I didn't mention that I wanted to, because going back and watching that Bills game, they consistently were taking advantage of them when they get 5 guys out in the pattern.
I see your protection simulated pressure stat stuff, and I raised you a Mahomes scramble stat. So Mahomes is one of the most devastating scramblers, just one of the most efficient ones. He scrambles, he gets first downs. It's very frustrating.
Yeah,
I'm sure
it's maddening. It's maddening.
I'm sure for opposing teams and opposing fans, it's very frustrating. He is automatic at it, but he's even more devastating. So, and the highest rate of scrambles in the entire league, only over Lamar, or Lamar is right below him, I should say. Scrambles against zone. If it's third down, if it's passing downs, those guys are, double teaming Kelsey. They're getting all those things. He's going to get into creation mode, but look for him to run. And I think that's just going to be an interesting one way that he can maybe break this back. If you want to run these exotic looks, the simulated pressure, I'm just going to scramble on you. All right, see ya. Want to do it again? All right, I'm just going to break contain and scramble on you again. So it's kind of funny how we might see a lot of Lamar Jackson from the pocket, and we're going to just see Mahomes, the scrambler, throughout the game. So kind of going back, maybe a little bit opposite of some of these attacks that we think, but I had to throw that in there as well. Thanks for letting me do that.
Awesome collection of matchups. Awesome weekend on tap. Very, very excited about it. Hope you guys are as well. For now, that is all we've got. Please make sure you're checking out everything else on the channel. Another episode of Prospects to Pros with Nate and Dane this week. We've got some good stuff coming with Football GM heading into the weekend.
On this week.
Jim Nagy up from the Senior Bowl coming on, which is great. Little Senior Bowl preview with the Senior Bowl on tap here very soon. If you could, if you haven't, subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. I assume most of you who listen have subscribed, but if you're just listening to this as a one-off, if you've never listened to the show before, we would sincerely appreciate if you would hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review on Apple or on Spotify, wherever you happen to listen. If you've been a listener all year, if you've been a listener for multiple years, now's the time. I would consider it a personal favor if you would tell us why you've liked the show over your time listening. So very much appreciate that. Very much appreciate every single one of you for spending the time with us. We will be back on Sunday night right here, breaking down all things championship weekend. Until then, appreciate you listening. We'll talk to you soon.